Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of our I Do Work Here Lady, where employees get mistaken for regular Joe Schmoes. I've got 6 stories for you today. The first is about a ski instructor mistaken for a regular customer, with a mom wondering why she didn't get a discount as well. The second story involves a supervisor unaware that the person she's been bullying is her boss's child. Yikes! The third story is about how a customer thought an employee was a random person talking to them. I hope you stay for all the stories today and subscribe for future videos. The first story is titled, "It's Not a Child Discount, I Work Here." I'm so lucky to work my dream part-time job teaching little kids how to ski. It's the cutest thing I've ever seen, and I love seeing them smile when I take them up the bunny hill at the end of a lesson. Seriously, if you can get this job, get it! I also get a very good employee discount, which is nice because after a full day of lessons, I'm exhausted. Kids are fun, but I'm tall, so holding them upright while walking backward and forward does a number on my back. I like to reward myself with a chocolate bar, a hot dog, and a soda after a full day of work, using the aforementioned amazing discount while I wait for my mom to pick me up. It had been a nice warmish winter day, so I had a full day of lessons with hyperactive youngsters. I think everyone within a 100-kilometer radius was on the hill, booking last-minute lessons. Needless to say, the cafeteria was just as packed. I was standing in line for my hot dogs when I got my mom's text saying she was parking. I should preface this by saying there were more instructors this year than coats, so I was wearing one from a manager on vacation and had to turn it in after my shift each day, meaning I was wearing my own jacket. I finally got to the checkout, grabbed my chocolate bar and handed the cashier my employee badge, which I need to note looks similar to a season pass, so she could apply my discount. I should also mention that the cafeteria was pretty full, so we were packed like sardines, but not to the point where we were smushed in line. I'm not sure why this lady was standing close enough to me to read the discount on the bill I was handed. I'm paranoid and always check it before leaving to make sure the discount was applied, which was a big mistake. This woman shoved her kid right up to the counter, handed the child the payment card and said, "You pay." Then she turned to the cashier and said, "We want the child discount," in a sickly sweet voice. I was confused. The cashier was confused. The other instructors in front of me were confused. We were a ski hill known for our ski school. It would go out of business if there was a child discount. The cashier said, "We don't have a child discount." "Yes, you do," the lady said, shoving her terrified kid toward the counter. She then pointed at me and said, "She got the child discount." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but she works here," the cashier replied. "No, she doesn't," the lady said, pointing to the other instructors. "They do. This child is not even old enough to work here. Look at her." I kind of shrugged and ate my hot dog. This really wasn't my problem, or so I thought, and I wasn't quite ready to leave yet, as I needed some help to get my skis into our car. I then went to stand by a wall because there was no seating left and watched what happened. The lady said, "Where's the discount?" The cashier calmly said again, "I told you, there is no discount." The lady waved her arms like a mad person and pointed toward me while I was stuffing my face. "She got one. My daughter should get one too." The cashier then said again, "I've told you once already that she's indeed an employee." I finally got annoyed with this and told her that I do in fact work here as an instructor. The lady said to me, "You're too young to work here and everyone can see that you're lying. You're not even wearing an instructor's coat." "Yeah, because I clocked out." "It's called changing your clothes after the shift," I replied. She then looked at the cashier and said, "Then what discount did she get?" pointing an accusatory finger at me. The cashier, getting really annoyed, said, "The employee one." At this point, the people behind her were pretty upset, and some were telling her to pay and move on. The lady started pointing at my employee card, which was hanging between my soda and chocolate, and said that it looked just like her kid's pass. I was now at my wit's end, and showed her that it said employee on the card. She turned red, then demanded that I give it to her for her child to use. I simply informed her that I'm not allowed to share it with anyone and left. Before you ask, I have no idea what happened next. I applied late, which is part of why I didn't have my own jacket, but I didn't know if this needed to be reported or not. No one got hurt, and I assume she paid and went on her unmerry way. I never saw her again. It would have been funny if the cashier had turned to the mom and said, "There is no children's discount, ma'am, but there is a senior's discount." Some people, this one's titled, "You Just Assaulted the Chief Operating Officer's Son." I used to work in a summer student program at a Fortune 500 company. The work itself was pretty monotonous, but for the most part, everyone was pretty warm toward the interns, except for Jamie. Jamie was a plump woman in her mid-40s working as a team supervisor, which is 2 levels above entry level in the operations department, for about a decade. I don't know whether it was working at this level for too long or just not liking young faces, but she was an absolutely bitter person to the interns. Aside from calling us little brats, tards, and a slurry of other things, she would also ask interns who weren't on her team to do random tasks for her. This ranged from grabbing her papers from the copier, running errands, and demanding we drop what we were doing to make coffee for her. Out of respect, most, if not all, the interns on the floor would comply to prevent a scene. But she had this idea in her head that since she was a supervisor, she was all of our bosses. She would constantly leave her desk to walk the floor and monitor the summer students, spitting slurs at us if she caught us glancing away from the monitors. In contrast, she would constantly brown-nose the managers and senior managers. Suffice to say, she was an angst-filled person. I was a quiet young lad who hated unnecessary attention from others, so I didn't openly volunteer that my mom was the chief operating officer. She worked up on the executive floor, so I rarely saw her. Aside from her upper management friends, few people knew I was her son. All was well until the end of my first month. It was sometime in the morning when Jamie stopped me on the way to the bathroom and demanded that I stop wasting time and get her coffee from the kitchen with 2 stevia and 2 milks. Not being the confrontational type, I went and made it exactly as asked, with maybe just a smidge of extra milk. When I brought it to her, she half yelled, "Finally!" grabbed it and sipped it. She then said it was wrong and shoved it back in my face with enough force to dislodge the cheap lid and spill the coffee all over my dress shirt. She yelled something at me, but I couldn't hear it as I felt the coffee. To be honest, I'm kind of glad I added the extra milk, because the scalding hot magma would have been much worse without it. I screamed and ran to the bathroom, taking off my shirt to get water on my burns. My upper chest was so red. I immediately called my mom, explaining what had just happened. My mom whipped downstairs, came to the bathroom, pulled me out, and was greeted by 3 large security guards. She told me to point to who did it, and point I did. What followed was my mom telling one guard to call 911 and the other 2 to detain her for assaulting an employee. Jamie's face was flushed white as a ghost as security apprehended her. Police came, got the videotapes, corroborated my story, and she was taken in. But the icing on the cake was that she was originally going to be charged with second-degree assault. However, the interns were interviewed about her, and they all confirmed that she was guilty of being a terrible supervisor. This was proof of premeditation, so her charges were raised to first-degree assault. I hope some jail time treats you better than you treated the interns, Jamie. Even if he wasn't the chief operating officer's son, nobody should be shoving scalding coffee at anyone in a workplace. With great power comes great responsibility. Unfortunately, Jamie used her powers for evil. I'm pretty sure everyone was happy that she got canned. This one's titled, "Maybe She Just Can't See Orange." I thought this little interaction was hilarious and definitely wanted to share my story. I cut my hours back at the grooming salon I worked at and took a second job in retail because it pays more. At this new job, we wear aprons as our uniform, and they are quite bright orange. It was pretty busy on Saturday, so I was more focused on customers rather than restocking, running around and asking everyone, "Are you finding things okay?" etc. I walked up to this nice couple who were looking at new faucets for their bathroom. "This is my department. Perfect. It went like this." I said, "Hey, are you looking to upgrade your faucet?" The lady said, "Yeah, I really like this one. What do you think?" The husband replied, "I like this different one." "Which one do you like?" I responded, "I like the brushed nickel ones because they're easier to keep clean and don't really show fingerprints." The wife agreed with me, and I said, "How many holes does your sink have so I can point you at the right configuration to fit?" The husband pointed at one and said they were thinking about buying it. The wife, however, saw that the box was open and started to wonder if any pieces were missing. She then turned to me and said, "Have you seen any employees? Maybe they can scan it." I said, "Oh, totally," not realizing what she said. I whipped out the scanner and said, "Oh, look, we have 4. The lady just looked at me and started laughing hysterically. She then said, "Oh my God, you work here." Her husband was like, Mary, she's wearing an apron. How did you even—" She was basically rolling on the floor, dying between fits of laughter, and said, "I thought you were a customer." I was like, why is this random girl so interested in our faucet? We were all laughing our butts off because how do you not see the bright orange apron that I'm wearing? So, I ran off and got a ladder to grab her an unopened faucet box. When I came back, she was only starting to regain composure. She thanked me and shook her head. She said she hadn't laughed like that in ages. It was fantastic, definitely one of the best customer interactions I've ever had. It's definitely something I bet she won't ever forget. I know I won't. This one's titled, I am not hallucinating my treatment. I think and hope this fits here, as it relates to someone else, although I was involved, and they did work there. Some years ago I had a short outpatient procedure, which caused me to have a serious infection. I was rushed back to the hospital by ambulance and spent a total of 10 days there with something verging on sepsis. Rules and targets meant that within 24 hours I had to be discharged or moved to a ward. After 23.5 hours I was on a ward. It was late evening. I was fixed up with a cannula and a drip, and I settled down to sleep. I was reasonably comfortable, and although ill, I was feeling a bit more normal. I was awoken at about 3 a.m. by the patient in the next bed having an incident, which I'll gloss over for reasons of delicacy. I looked around to find a large, fresh bloodstain on my sheets. In my rather restless sleep, I had ripped out my cannula, which was the tube in my arm administering drugs. I pressed the call button. A very nice young guy arrived. The nursing station was in sight from my bed, and there was a group of 4 or 5 people there, including the guy who came over, all dressed in black trousers and high-necked black tunics, in addition to 2 nurses I recognized from earlier. He very efficiently and painlessly reinserted the cannula, cleaned me up, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, after breakfast, 2 nurses came around to change the sheets for everyone. Mine were a mess, so I explained what had happened. They looked very weary and said there were no male nurses on the ward. I explained that the guy was in a black jacket. They looked at me strangely and said there were no workers in black uniforms. I insisted I'd been treated by the person I described, but they wouldn't have it. Eventually, in sweet, calming voices, they started to agree with everything I said. Obviously, they were humoring me. They went on with their work. A bit later, I saw them discussing something with the charge nurse, with the occasional glance in my direction. I was now getting worried and beginning to doubt myself. Then one of them came over beaming uncomfortably. I thought, this is it. They're going to take me to the loony bin. She then, rather hesitantly, explained that a large party of student doctors had been touring night shifts the previous night, unknown to her or her colleague. They had a new design of uniform in black. I was right after all, and he did work there. This one's titled, I am not a scammer. I actually worked for a real support company. I was accused of fraudulently impersonating an employee of a company that I actually worked for. Years ago, I worked doing call center tech support for a legitimate US-based company. We served mostly elderly clients. The way it worked is they paid a subscription, and we were on call 24/7 as much as they needed. We could remotely access their PCs to fix them, log in to show them how to do something, etc. This service wasn't cheap, easily in excess of $100 a month, but justifiable given that most customers would call a couple of times a week, and it could take a couple of hours per call. Several of our customers were deaf, and they would call us via teletype service. For those who don't know, the deaf caller types via text chat or signs with video chats with a third-party service, who then calls and speaks for them, relaying the message over the phone to the person on the other end. They're supposed to be impartial and convey messages word for word. It's essentially a translator job. You don't interject commentary into the discussion, you just relay the message as precisely as possible. However, some of the smaller services only staff a few dozen operators and have frequent dealings with the same customers, so there's a sense of familiarity that can arise, and sometimes that impartiality is compromised. A customer called us using one such teletype service for help removing some malware from his computer. Initially, all went according to plan. In the course of removing the malware, we needed to reboot his PC, which meant he would be disconnected from the teletype operator, who he was communicating with via that PC. So, when the computer rebooted, I reconnected to his PC and connected to the service again. This time he got a different operator, some guy named Jared, who had apparently interacted with him before. Mind you, the call was unnecessary. I could see his computer screen and everything he was typing to the teletype operator. I could have chatted with him directly through the PC, but it wasn't my call. So, this Jared dude, serving as the go-between, decided that I'm a scammer and he's going to warn my customer. He started putting words into my mouth, things I didn't say, completely unaware that I could see all of this on the customer's computer. He remarked that he couldn't understand me through my heavy Indian accent. I'm a white guy born in the US and couldn't fake a convincing Indian accent if I tried. He started getting mildly racist, explaining to Bill, my customer, that part of his disability is that he can't hear my accent, and if he could, he would hang up immediately and know it was a scam. He kept making these little asides with the customer, which I could see in the chat, telling him that I don't actually work for the company that I claim to work for and warning him not to give me a credit card. I never asked for one, and Bill's a subscriber. I've had his number for years and charged a predetermined amount per our contract. Jared said I don't work for XYZ company, that I'm just saying that, lying about Bill having a computer virus to take his money, and that the company would never hire a guy like me. I get how he could think that, and we've all seen the scam before. In the right context, it's not bad advice, but he didn't have all the facts. Like that, Bill has been my client for years, that we have a contract, and he was getting charged the same whether he called me or not. This wasn't a case of a customer returning some scammer's voicemail. He was calling a service vendor that he had existing dealings with. So, I opened a notepad on Bill's desktop and started typing to him. I said, "Sir, I can assure you I did not ask for a credit card number, nor will I. I can see the chat screen, and half of what I'm saying is not being conveyed at all, and most of what he's typing to you I did not say. Also, he's not telling me what you're typing, or when he does, he's conveying it in a very hostile tone." He typed back in the notepad window saying, "Yeah, you're talking to Jared. I've dealt with him before. He's an ass. He's supposed to quote us word for word, but I've had some suspicions about him for a while. Complained a few times, but nothing ever comes of it." So, I addressed Jared and said, "Hey Jared, you realize I can see Bill's screen as we talk, right? I do work for XYZ company, and I can prove it. You want to put your supervisor on the phone? I'd love to show him these chat logs, and of course, I'm recording the call on my end. I'll send him a copy." In the end, Bill got his teletype service comped for a few months, many apologies from the service, and Jared got fired. I removed the malware, and Bill reached out to me via email, thanking me a few weeks later. Had I not been able to see the screen, neither Bill nor I would have known what the other was saying, and this ignorant person would have been proud of his deception and actually thought he was the good person because of it. It's so condescending. Even if his intentions were good, I'm glad he got fired. Just to say, most teletype operators do their jobs extremely well. I've worked with many over the years, and this was an isolated incident in my experience. This was just one guy on a power trip, abusing his position for the sake of his own ego. Being the gatekeeper to other people's communications with the world is actually a lot more power than many people can or should be trusted with. This one's titled, "Kevin Assumes Every Woman in Construction is a Receptionist." Hint, we're not. This happened about 20 years ago. Equal opportunity was becoming a thing in the workplace, but in construction, things have a habit of not quite keeping pace. I'd been working for a manufacturing company in construction for several years as the only woman in the sales area. I was given the task of manning the phones, as well as operating support. One day, a call came in. I said, "Good morning. Thanks for calling the company. How can we help you today?" Kevin said, "Yes. I'd like to speak to one of the guys, please. I have a question." I replied, "That's no problem. If you let me know what you need, I'll be happy to help you out." He said, "Oh no, that's okay. I'd be happy to wait for one of the guys." I responded, "Unfortunately, all the guys are busy on other calls. But I can help you now. I work in the sales section here as well." I'm looking at my coworker now, who's turned to look at me. He knows that voice. He tells me again that it's fine, that he'd rather wait for one of the guys. My coworker and I are looking at each other. We know what's going to happen next. I said, "Okay, no problem. Let me put you through." I put this gentleman through, not breaking eye contact with my colleague. He's looking right back as he reaches out a hand and picks up the receiver. My colleague says, "Good morning. How can we help you today?" I can't hear the conversation, but there's silence as Kevin talks. My colleague keeps his eyes on me as he listens. Finally he speaks and says, "Oh, you need to speak to the chemical specialist? Let me put you through." A smile is starting to quirk my lips. As a person who has a lifelong love of science and chemistry, I naturally fell into specializing in what chemical products we sold. Over time, I ended up being the go-to for anything to do with technical questions. My colleague is still looking at me as he transfers the call. We are together in this golden moment. I reach out, pick up the call, and bring the receiver up and say, "Good morning, how can I help you?" There is a long, pregnant silence on the line. Finally, Kevin speaks and says, "Hello, I was being put through to your chemical specialist. Is he there right now?" This is better than that time my bestie made me cookies and forgot to tell me they were augmented. My colleague and I are grinning like fools. Maybe this phone is augmented. I replied, "That's me. I'm the chemical specialist." After a silence, while Kevin digested this horrifying news, to his credit, he managed to successfully process that I might be able to help him. The discussion went on normally from there, and I was able to sort his problem immediately. He even said thanks before he hung up. No thank you, Kevin. Another feel-good story to end the episode. And continue with this is my thoughts on these stories. Story 1. It's not a child discount. I work here. I love the energy of this story. The ski instructor's passion for teaching kids is infectious. The entitled mom's insistence on a non-existent child discount was absurd, especially since she misread an employee badge for a season pass. It's frustrating that she accused the narrator of lying about working there, but I chuckled at the narrator's sassy, it's called, changing your clothes after the shift comeback. The chaos of a busy ski hill added to the humor, and I'm glad the narrator just walked away from the nonsense. Story 2. You just assaulted the chief operating officer's son. Jamie's bullying of interns was infuriating, and her coffee-throwing tantrum was outright unacceptable. I felt for the narrator dealing with burns and humiliation, but the swift justice, thanks to his mom being the COO, was so satisfying. The escalation to first-degree assault charges due to her pattern of behavior felt like the universe balancing the scales. Nobody should abuse their authority like that, and I'm thrilled Jamie faced real consequences. Story 3. Maybe she just can't see orange. This one had me laughing out loud. The customer missing the bright orange apron is peak obliviousness, and the narrator's cheerful helpfulness made it even funnier. The couple's genuine laughter and the wife's admission that she thought the narrator was just a chatty customer was wholesome. It's a lighthearted reminder that sometimes people are just too caught up in their own world to notice the obvious. Story 4. I am not hallucinating my treatment. I felt the narrator's growing anxiety as the nurses dismissed their account of the male nurse in black. It's unsettling to doubt your own reality. The twist with the student doctors in new uniforms was a relief, and I appreciated the nurse's apologetic clarification. This story shows how communication gaps in a hectic hospital setting can lead to confusion, but I'm glad it ended with validation for the narrator. Story 5. I am not a scammer. Jared's overstep as a teletype operator was maddening. He had no business injecting his assumptions into the call, especially with racist undertones. I was cheering when the narrator caught him in the act via the screen and called him out. His firing and the comp service for Bill felt like justice served. This story is a stark reminder of the harm caused by unchecked ego in roles that demand neutrality. Story 6. Kevin assumes every woman in construction is a receptionist. Hint, we're not. Kevin's outdated assumption that only men could handle technical questions was cringeworthy, but the narrator's patience and the colleague's setup made this a golden moment. I was grinning at the silence on the line when Kevin realized the chemical specialist was the woman he dismissed. This story is a perfect takedown of sexism in the workplace, and I love how the narrator handled it with professionalism and a touch of sass. I hope you enjoyed these 6 stories today. If you like the stories, let me know by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to hit that like button as well. If you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. See you guys in the next one.